Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, keep it on here. Jerlene Tatum. Jerlene Tatum is an entrepreneur. She's a small business owner and a community organizer and a mother to 4. Jerlene has spent the majority of her life living in Long Beach, yet as a child, Jerlene lived in the Ozark Mountains with her paternal grandparents. Growing up with Southern grandparents, she was always told only to speak when spoken to, and often told she talked too much. Members of her family began to call her Yacky Yak. I think I've been called that a time or two. In 2019, Jerlene found the power of her own voice and began creating videos about local politics and Long Beach issues. Jerlene now shares her candid thoughts about parenting, tricks, and education on social media. Please welcome to the stage, Jerlene.
Wow. Good evening, everybody. Well, my name is Jerlene. I am a mother to 4. I have 2 adult children, a teenager that I want to send to the moon, and a 10-year-old that's my shadow. Like, she was trying to come with me tonight, and I'm like, no, you can't. And all day, Mommy, what time? What time? So I'm here, as it was shared in my mini bio. I spent some time in the Ozark Mountains with my grandparents. So my grandfather, he believed that California was there was gonna be an earthquake and California was gonna float off into the ocean. And he also thought that anybody who lived in California, that something was wrong with them. So he was trying to save me by making sure that I lived with him in the mountains with him and my grandmother. So I lived with my paternal grandparents, Ezekiel Tatum, and my step-grandmother, Lillian. My biological grandmother, Jerlene, had passed before I was born, so I never got an opportunity to meet her. Yet I did get to go visit her grave. It was about a quarter of a mile up the road from our home. So we lived in Clinton, Arkansas. Ozark Mountains, Highway 65, Route 1, zip code 72031. My very first phone number I remember was 501-745-8117. I thought my grandparents were old, but I've come to realize that my grandparents were about the same age I am now. Not old. So my grandmother, she was really strict, and she would beat us for anything. So I wasn't the only grandchild that lived with her. I lived with my cousins, but I was the snitch. I was the one that told on everybody. I still got beat. But my grandmother, we had chores, we had responsibilities. So even as a small child, I had to work in the garden. So my grandparents were pretty well off to live in the South. I didn't realize how well off they were until I grew older, and I was like, ooh, grandparents had a nice house. So grandparents had a garden, and my grandmother had her flowers all in the front. I loved springtime. The tulips would come up. It was my favorite time of the year. But when it was time to harvest, I really hated it. So my grandmother would get me up in the morning, and the sun came up, and I would be in the garden working. And I remember saying, Grandma, my back hurt. And she said, you ain't got a back. Girl, you ain't got a back. You got a gristle. And I would be so confused. Like, I got that same little white piece of thing that's in the chicken? It was really confusing to me. But my grandmother used to wear these house gowns. And I gotta show you guys this. So hold on for just a moment. Just give me a second.
Oh yes.
Okay, so I had to put this on. So my grandmother would wear these house dresses, and this was really fancy, by the way. But they had these buttons down the front, and she would have really old ones that were really thin, you could see through, and then she would have really nice ones that she wore to the grocery store. And oftentimes when she was at home, she would not have on any undergarments, any underoos, and she was 4'11", and there's only adults in here. My grandmother's titties hung to her waist, okay? So when she sat in a chair, her feet didn't touch the ground, but when she walked around without a bra, her titties hung to her waist. And oftentimes she would not have on underwear unless we went into town. So one day we're in town, we're in the grocery store, and my grandmother's walking. She pauses for a minute, I look back, my grandmother's drawers had fallen off. She stepped out of them, picked them up, stuck them in her purse, and kept on grocery shopping. But one morning, we were working in the garden. I don't know what my grandmother did. I just remember being really, really angry this morning. And she was pulling weeds out of her flowers. And I'm having a hurt gristle pulling weeds out my row in the garden. And she had on a really thin house dress. No underclothes. The thin one though, the one that my grandfather would say, woman, go put some drawers on. That one, she had that one on. And it was, you could see right through it. And we lived across the road from the pasture. All of a sudden, this horsefly comes from across the highway. And I'm watching. And my grandmother bends over. And this horsefly stings her in her ass. And all you hear was, ah! And my grandfather turned around. He said, woman, what the hell's wrong with you? That's what you get. That's my story, y'all. Jerlene Tatum.